we're taking the word crazy in a very different direction.
Okay, so I went crazy, kind of fun, eccentric, enthusiastic.
Yes.
Where are you taking us?
This next writer was a king. He was an architect,
Okay,
engineer,
of course.
botanist,
If you got the time.
general,
I got nothing.
but most importantly, he was a poet who was so intensely beloved by his people. His poems were so impactful that 100 years after his death, they were able to recite these poems and record them to preserve their culture and eventually to help revive their alphabet.
You tell me.
So, why do I say he was crazy?
Yeah, this guy sounds amazing.
Because he almost undoubtedly ripped out a human heart at some point in his life, likely many human hearts.
Now, when you say many, can you put a number on the human hearts that he may or may not have ripped out? Are we talking like 2-digit, 3-digit number?
Where he was a general and a very successful general, I would put it in the thousands.
Oh my.
But it's hard to say. He was kind of controversial at the time because
Rip out a few hearts and people start talking.
Because he worshipped one of the only gods of his civilization that did not require human sacrifice. We are talking about Coyote, the king of Texcoco of the Aztec Empire.
I wondered when you were talking about the heart ripping if we were heading Aztec.
Yes, we are.
Okay, now I am not familiar with this person whose name I cannot yet pronounce. I'll learn it.
Are you familiar with the Aztecs?
Oh, absolutely.
All right. Do you want to give just a brief primer on the Aztec Empire?
Civilization based in Mexico. They actually supposedly founded their main city, Tenochtitlan, in the middle of a lake because they were told to find an eagle grasping a serpent. Was it on a tree?
Sitting on a cactus that was sprouting from a rock.
Yes, and they saw this in the center of a lake, and rather than say, this is close enough, they went out to the middle of the lake and actually built a city and created more land within the lake. I believe it was almost 5 square miles at its peak. Okay, Mexico City is largely built on the ruins of that. They drained the lake. There's also the whole thing of it being a warrior death cult. Many of their religious practices were incredibly bloody and possibly cannibalistic. There are things that we don't know about this, largely because the Spanish were so incredibly thorough at destroying their culture and their writings. But we still know some, and much of it is pretty dark. Lots of human sacrifice. Anyways, was that good enough?
That was great.
Thank you.
Actually. So the Aztec Empire, the Aztecs first came from somewhere else, and we don't actually know where. There's a lot of controversy about where exactly they came from. But they just kind of came in as these like barbarians from the north and built a new city, actually on the ruins of a much older city. At Tenochtitlan. But they really came into power when they formed the Triple Alliance, right? Which was these 3 cities, Tenochtitlan, Texcoco, and Tlacopan.
Okay.
Right? These 3 city-states that kind of band together and subjugate the entire surrounding area. Yes. And Yeah, because they were this warrior cult, essentially. Now, the person behind that alliance is Netzahualcoyotl.
Oh, he was that guy.
He was that guy.
Oh, dang.
He is born as the Prince of Texcoco. Texcoco.
Forgive our pronunciation.
Yeah.
We pull from a lot of cultures. We do our best, I promise.
Neither of us actually speaks Nahuatl. So our pronunciation is going to be a little bit off. But Netzahualcoyotl is actually born Acolmitzli, which means strong puma.
Solid
or
name.
Mountain lion. But when he is 13 to 15 years old, this neighboring city-state attacks, drives out him and his father, and eventually his father is hunted down and killed. But before the enemy forces essentially close in around them, he sends Acolmitzli off on his own to just evade and survive. And he does. He manages to escape and live on his own as a fugitive for years, until finally his relations that are still alive are able to beg and barter to get him a pardon. But he's still left without really anything. He's essentially a refugee. He goes, I believe it was to Tenochtitlan, and gets a bit of an education and starts to make friends and gain influence. And eventually, as he grows up, he now takes the name Netzahualcoyotl, which means fasting coyote.
Fasting is in not eating?
Fasting is in not eating. It actually means coyote with a fasting collar on, which when someone was fasting for religious purposes, they would wear this special necklace with like twists of paper on it to indicate that you shouldn't offer them food or shouldn't like eat around them because it will make their fasting harder. So his name means a coyote or a coyote, depending on where you're from.
I like
wearing this fasting
and
collar.
he gave himself this name.
He gave himself this name.
It's a very specific name.
Because he's a poet.
Okay.
Right? He's this solitary wanderer like a coyote. Then he's carrying like the remains of this religious observance. It's very poetic, and you know, poets can be a little bit dramatic sometimes.
Fair enough.
So he goes out and eventually is able to build up enough support in the cities of Tenochtitlan and Tlacopan to gather an army and invade and retake his city of Texcoco. And then goes even further and takes this army and conquers the invaders. Everybody around him, and he like led this himself. He was the general of this whole thing. He goes to Tenochtitlan and Tlacopan and says, "You saw how well this worked. What if we made this permanent?" And actually writes up the triple alliance between these three cities and makes the Aztec Empire himself. It is the force of this one man's charisma.
Wow.
That forges what we now know as the Aztec Empire.